When the internet first came out, it seemed revolutionary, like it might bring some great change for the good. And it did for a while. But really, this might have been an opportunity to continue the book burning, getting rid of information, repackaging it again. And when the internet started, we had the search engine without censoring, and even that was too much, too difficult to control. So now the AI, and just like the internet started out good, this too has quickly become compromised. How quickly they're able to remove information just days later, and how this AI follows suit, pushing the desired agenda. And now history is like a week ago. I mean, things I watched a week ago are now gone. Gone. What a team of exterminators of truth. And I hate the expression truther. Tonight I think it's a flattering term. It's an important value that I haven't acknowledged as an important value, even though a grand motivator for how I live my life. What I've discovered when it comes to truth is it's never the first thing that you're given. Most people, sheeple, believe very similar things, the first thing they were told. And it's not that the truther rejects the first thing they're told. We just put it on the shelf until something else comes along, something that makes more sense. And I think most people don't want the truth. You resist it until you can't, until it becomes so clear. So I thank you for being here tonight, or today, whatever it is. I love you all, God bless, and welcome. So recently, in my last video, we looked at the Buffalo, New York World's Fair. And that's not what this video's about. There was one interesting thing that I found pertaining to the tower. The tower that they demolished, as we discovered. I mean, all of this was demolished. And I just love this tower. And all the World's Fairs had one like it. Similar ones in San Francisco. And it was someone in a comment that told me to check out the Cleveland, Ohio Terminal Tower. So I did, and here she is. And these old photos are kind of hit or miss. This is still here. This cake building, wedding cake. Unbelievable. And I think we get a feel, an appreciation for what these World's Fair buildings might have really looked like up close. Pretty overcast day, and not the best picture. But you get my point. Let's go back to this one. Same type of wedding cake, square sections becoming round, as we can see here, and many others. We can see some drone footage of this Cleveland tower, and absolutely imposing, especially when it doesn't have a fair around it. Neither of them make sense. Not this one in Ohio or this one in Buffalo. Now, I want to take you somewhere else. Let's take a pause. So again, I said this is not a World's Fair video, and it's not. But I must discuss it, at least for a minute, before showing you this latest discovery. So here's a list of World's Fairs. Beginning in London, 1851. We have an enormous crystal palace made of glass that catches fire. That should be strange. That should raise flags in most thinking people's minds, but it doesn't. Later we have the Paris World's Fair in 1900. Same glory. Quite honestly, too many World's Fairs, especially pre-1900. Dublin, New York, 1853. I mean, a lot of them we haven't explored. And many of the later ones, like these on the right side, are pretty uninteresting. Perhaps still held on the same grounds, many of the buildings demolished by then. What usually concerns me is anything pre-1930-ish. And there are so many elements and aspects to these fairs that can be dissected, proving that history is not what we've been led to believe it is. And going back to recent events, politics, and various events, it's no different. We're being played. And it's not even a very good playbook. It's not even a good story. When you need to use censorship or even the taking of lives, it means your case is pretty weak. It's not working. And you to now move on to plan B, which is silencing people. And this is not a right or a left issue. Both sides of the aisle are compromised. None of these bastards have our best interests in mind. Sure, they know what we want, and they tell us what we want to hear, especially when it's election time. And once they get in, it seems like everything they do undermines the average person's well-being and sanity, especially with the gaslighting. So let's take a pause. Okay, forgive me. These evening videos, the lack of distraction, all seem to bring out my rantiness. But let's get serious here. This is not really a World's Fair. This is the South Carolina Interstate and West Indian Exposition. So that's another thing that really adds to a slow unraveling of these World's Fairs, is their weird names. Sometimes called a World's Fair, sometimes called an expo. This one, the Interstate and West Indian Expo? It sounds uninteresting. How did I even find this? Like I said, the truth eventually is all that's left. The truth is just standing there, looming over you. In this case, these buildings. These buildings tell the most obvious story, and most people miss it. And this is one example of the benefits of the internet. They've allowed us to look at these photos of the old world, of old America, and every country in the realm. And what we learn is that these countries are not so different. They all have the same evidence left behind. So this was a fair in South Carolina, held in the winter, December to May of 1902. A winter fest, a winter fair. In actuality, they're not sure. Some sources state that the expo closed on June 1st and or opened on December 1st. So there we go, 1901. We don't even know what the hell happened, and they're trying to tell us they built this building? They don't even know when it opened or closed. But we're to believe they built these buildings? This doesn't look like a fair. It looks like some grand capital. And all these fairs, they never look like fairs. Always capital-style buildings. So what do they say about this fair? It was a regional trade fair held in Charleston, South Carolina. Here they're very certain of the date. History. To overcome weakening trade with Latin America and the Caribbean, the International Expo was held in Atlanta, Georgia in 1895. A railroad executive, J.A., too lazy to give him a name today, advocated holding an expo in Charleston. J.C., the editor of a newspaper, and some other guy decided to host a World's Fair in Charleston. They didn't have any money. They didn't have a dime. So they formed a company and began soliciting funds. There we go. So they don't have any money. Great. They didn't have any money. And they ended up with this. Need we go on? Let us. They continue to try to get money to scrap together to have a fair, asking the federal government. They did not offer any support. This man, the president of the fair that has no money, suggested that 250 acres of his property be used for the fair. Why 250 acres? You have no money yet. 10 would be fine. Maybe 20. So now the company hires New York architect. How are they hiring an architect? They still have no money. Here's the architect. This was the same architect that was supervising another fair just a few years before this in Atlanta, Georgia. So here we go, another fair. This one was called the Cotton Fair. Fucking Cotton Fair. Here it is. All this for cotton. And the same architect. We need to have an architect to design Cotton Fair. This man, very jovial man. He's given credit for the first steel-framed building and the first skyscraper in New York City. Busy man designing cotton fairs in his spare time. And what did Gilbert choose as the architectural style for these buildings? The Spanish Renaissance style. style. Here we can see a little Spanish Renaissance, and here as well. And this castle in Spain, just for a few examples. Really looking World's Fairy. You can see why they told us he chose this style. So he chooses this style that is going to include buildings painted creamy off-white. This led to it being called the Ivory City. There we go. Similar story to the Chicago World's Fair, which was called the White City. And the expo faced many challenges. The weather wasn't good, and of course there was a shortage of funds. But we have an architect. The attendance was disappointing. Only 600,000 people came. The cost was a little over $1 million, and they only earned 300,000. There we go. There's history. Here is history. Sorry. I mean, we read here they had $50,000, and then some guy donates 258. That's it. You have 50 grand and too much acreage. Jovial architect and a flop. Somehow they raised $1 million to build this city. All these buildings. And it was not a success. Nobody turned out for this fair. Bogus fair. So that doesn't make any sense. Let's look at this fair a little closer. Pause. Full stop. Okay, so we learned that it was a disappointing turnout. They lost about $800,000 that they didn't even have to begin with. So much talk about the exhibits. Very important, the exhibits. And no talk of the construction. Like, that's not even important for people. If you're new here, I believe nothing on this site when it comes to important things, but use it to see what people will be told. Doesn't matter what I think. All of us have an expiration date. So 1901, this fair was built for a little over $1 million, and this is called the Cotton Palace and Sunken Garden. Cotton Palace. If you remember, maybe a dozen videos back, we discussed the Pig Palace, where a man built buildings like this to house livestock. So there's no end to the palace narrative. Palace is reserved for a king, or a pig, or cotton. Here we see the auditorium. It's like a round building. And just like all the World's Fairs, we have a manufacturer's building. Whatever, that must have been really important back then. Maybe like a selling point. Alright kids, we're off to the manufacturer's building. Yay! And as always, they take parts of these buildings and just throw them in park. Here we can see a bandstand from the Exposition, now in Hampton Park, indicating that all this was demolished. And after the Exposition, Charleston built Hampton Park. There we go. I mean, this should read after the Exposition, they demolished these buildings to make Hampton Park. And in the end, one building remains. It was known as the Grove, which was the women's building in the Exposition. Oh, of course, the women's building. And that's the only one that remains. So here we go. That's history. That's another fair that nobody's heard of. And was it really a fair? Or is this just some BS story used to explain away these pesky photographs that might surface one day? Let's take a pause. Okay, bonus. This is a photo that was shared by Mark at Our Melted Reality. Beautiful example of meltology. Many different stages here. You can see openings. This one is really good because you can see blockage protruding from underneath, showing that this outside has been heated much more than the inside. And that's always the case. We always see excellent preservation on the inside. But here we can see many different stages of heat affecting the block. Out here on the front face portion, blocks, the arches are still in really good shape. And as we move closer to what seems to be natural, we see these blocks reverting back to something that seems more crude. And all stages are evident here. And here's the same area. Of course, I don't know, but the evidence just keeps getting better and better. I mean, did somebody build the mountain, or did the building turn into a mountain? Only two options, and one seems ridiculous. Great picture. Thank you, Mark. And this was something that was shared with me by a Patreon. Thank you for this, Heidi. And this is the Königstein Fortress, the Saxon Bastille. It's a hilltop fortress near Dresden. And Dresden is, or was, one of the most beautiful cities when it comes to this old world architecture. Of course, grand portions of this city were obliterated in WW blank, and yet much remains, like this building, one of my favorite. But anyway, this fortress, a star fort, absolutely imposing and mountain-like once again, and yet anything but natural. And when was this fortress built? We're told it dates back to the year 1233, and these old structures have some of the most ridiculous narratives. Here we can see it in 1756, hundreds of years after its construction. And what could be more ridiculous? Who in several thousand years built this? What are these materials? This thing is damaged. Here we can see people building. They're building a little wood building here. Here we can see an opening into the base of the building. Even this artist wanted to show this. And nobody that we know of in history built this. Again, we can't even get the truth about events that happened a week ago. What makes us think we would have a good story about a structure like this? But what I really wanted to show you was something that was discovered in this structure somewhere around the third construction period, which will have been in 1694 to 1756, at the behest of August the Strong. I mean, this is just stupid. Anyone called August the Strong. I mean, this is like George Washington and all these, in my opinion, fictitious characters. Like this man had anything to do with anything in 1694. I am August the Strong. Oh, you don't fool me. But what did August insist upon, dear delicate August? He requested to build an enormous wine barrel. Königstein wine barrel. Greatest wine barrel in the world. It had a capacity of 200,000 liters. Okay, so this is a giant keg. We're talking about a giant keg? This is what August wanted built. But anyway, here we can see the people, just to get an idea of how large this keg is, built by the request of August the Strong. And I'll just end with this. What does this point to? Again, these BS stories, Cotton Palace, August's keg, points to another people. Look at this. Look at these urns on the side of the keg. 1775. These buildings, this keg, all belong to another people. Undoubtedly a large, and all their achievements in history have been hijacked by the descendants of people like this. So for this week, I thank you for being here. I love you all. God bless, and I'll see you in the next one.